Good day to all my viewers and subscribers, and a very warm welcome to my Labour Relations lecturer, Mrs. Karoka. My name is Justin Johnson, and I am currently a fourth year Human Resources Management academic at Cape Peninsula University of Technology. Today I am not alone, but I am accompanied by my group members, Nasira Abrams and Nandi Nyakaza. The main purpose of this video is to have an activity accompanied by a specific topic and explanation. The topic is divided into two parts, namely the tripartite role players, which is known as the employees, the employers, and the government, which would be done by Nasira Abrams. Part 2 focuses on three approaches, namely the unitarist approach, which would be discussed by me, the pluralist approach, which would be discussed by Nasira, and the Marxian approach, which would be discussed by Nandi. Each of us will also provide an activity with our respective approaches. I hope you guys enjoy. The topic that we are discussing today is known as the unitary approach. But before we start, in labor relations there is many approaches, and under each approach there is various theories. First I will explain a brief explanation of the unitary approach and then act out what the approach is. As the name says, unitary, which can be rounded down to unit, which means singular. This means management has the ultimate authority or has single authority in the workplace. Employer and employee relationship. Management holds the ultimate control and has ultimate authority when making decisions. Management makes the final decision and management controls everything. Employees and management work with shared goals for development of the industry. This is known as the ultimate interest. Management makes decisions through negotiation with the employees. This negotiation is a direct negotiation with the worker. Even though bargaining does not fall under this approach, managers will sneakily try and bargain with employees. This could result in workplace conflict, and this will arise between the manager and the employee, which will lead to a strike, and that strike is regarded as being destructive. Work conflict is a temporary aberration which results in poor management. Trade unions are deemed unnecessary unless employees cannot communicate directly to an employer. For example, an employee cannot speak to the employer or is sick. Anything other than communication is considered bargaining, which is not allowed.
Good day to all participants. My name is Nasira Abrams, and I will be covering the tripartite relationship as well as discussing the pluralistic approach to labor relations. I will also be discussing the important factors of this approach as well as telling you about my activity that I've chosen, why I've chosen the specific activity, and also discussing the activity in relation to the pluralistic approach to labor relations. So what is the employment relationship? The employment relationship is the relationship entered into between employees, employers, and the state. The role of the employers involve providing employees with a steady and stable income based on their skills and capabilities. The employers has to ensure that the work environment is also safe and healthy, as well as viable to work in, and in addition, ensure that there's constant communication and that there's no breakdown of communication, which will result in the breakdown of production, thus halting economic development. The role of the employees is to ensure that they are trustworthy, they are honest, they are fair, and that they obey the employer, and also that they ensure that they perform the duties and responsibilities as required to them by them from the employer. This is where the state comes in. The state within this relationship ensures that the relationship is regulated between the employees and employers, and also acts as a legal security, providing protection for both parties in the forms of the laws enacted or the laws promulgated, perhaps in the Labour Relations Act, and to ensure that the laws ensures that it aims to look after the interests of not only one party but of the both parties. I will be doing the pluralistic approach to labour relations, in which I'll be explaining what this approach entails. So, what is the pluralist approach? This approach maintains that the organization entails powerful and differing subgroups, namely the management and trade unions, and this approach believes that these groups each has their own differing goals and their own differing objectives and ideas that they believe in. The pluralist approach maintains that workplace conflict is inevitable and that the business organization is a conflicting social structure in which groups of individuals have conflicting welfares. These welfares may be in the form of different goals and values. Due to this perception, pluralist believes it is difficult to not recognize the different sources of power within an organization. Additionally, organizations cannot overcome conflicts. Thus, with organizations recognizing and acknowledging that there is conflict, conflict becomes a pivotal advantage of this approach. Pluralists acknowledge that the workplace consists of diverse attitudes, behaviors, values, and that it is almost impossible to unite all stakeholders towards sharing common and mutual interest and values. In the pluralist approach, each party may utilize power strategies in order to make the other party aware of their stances. These power strategies may be in the form of coercive power, reward power, referent power, or information power. Lastly, it is important to note that managers are seen as the linkage between the organization and between the employees. So instead of trying to enforce policies on employees, managers should be focused on reuniting the opposing parties within the pluralistic approach. The that I will be utilizing entails the use of an analogy. An analogy usually portrays how two things are similar. So analogy tends to not only show but to also bring a point across to get readers to understand information more clearly, and it sometimes may get confused for simile or metaphor, but with the goal of an analogy, it is aimed at bringing additional information across so that people can understand these similarities more better. So the reason why I chose analogy as part of my activity is because humans tend to make more mental links between similar views, ideas, and understandings, and these all benefit towards they all contribute towards human-like artificial intelligence. Additionally, an analogy goes much more deeper than a simile or metaphor. Instead, it tries to comprehend a message much more better in a way that it compares it to something that is already understood. So the analogy that I'll be using is a typical war. As most of you know, wars occurs because parties have different views, values, or goals. Additionally, these parties also have conflicting interests, which I compare to the weapons that they each are throwing at one another. As discussed previously, each party is loyal and devoted to the specific party that they belong to, and with regards to wars, this one citizen is loyal to its country because they follow the same mutual interests and values and goals, whereas a different party or different organization or country follows different opinions, values, interests, or goals. Also discussed previously, each party will try to make the other party aware of their stance. So they might make use of coercive tactics, as mostly occurred in wars. People would hurt each other or they would kill each other, and that can also take place within the pluralistic approach. I will now be handing over to my fellow group member Nandini Kaza. He will be discussing his approach, namely the Marxist approach, as well as concluding our presentation for today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, class and ma'am. My name is Nandini Nyakaza, and my group will be talking about the tripartite relationship and its effects on the economic systems. For my part, I will be talking about Marxism. You may be asking yourself, what is Marxism and what does it have to do with everything that we've previously mentioned? Well, I'd like to tell you, Marxism is a social, political, and economic philosophy named after Karl Marx. Now, this philosophy examines the effect of capitalism on labor, productivity, and economic development. This philosophy argues for a worker revolution where communism replaces capitalism. Karl Marx was very passionate about this because he felt the working class in all organization and all capitalist-headed countries, the working class were the ones being taken advantage of, and the capitalists were the ones gaining all the benefits. The capitalist and the workers defines economic relations in the current capitalist economy inevitably leads to revolutionary communism. So what Marx was saying was all capitalist societies will end up imploding in themselves and end up being communism countries. And this was the basis of his theory, the theory that the working class will eventually grow tired of being taken advantage of and tired of working for nothing and tired of being the working class and not having anything to their name or anything to their benefit, and will eventually take over the system and try to diminish it completely so that it can become communism. And communism is where everyone is on the same playing field. So that was what Karl Marx wanted to achieve, because he personally felt that the working class were being taken advantage of in all spheres. So now when we go into detail into what Karl Marx theory was and some of the elements that were part of this theory, we start to go into the nitty-gritties and the specifics about why he thought the way he did and some of the predictions that he ended up making based on the theory that he came up. So number one was business owners who control the means of production and the workers whose labor transforms raw commodities into valuable economic goods. So he was saying here that business owners control the means of productions and the workers don't even get a means of, they don't control anything. So business owners control everything. They have the bigger brunt of the pie, as we say it. The working class they only have access to the labor transforms where they can transform raw commodities into valuable economic goods. And what he's saying here is that the working class do the brunt of the work of turning the raw stuff into the valuable items, yet they don't benefit from it. The business owners, who are the ones who own everything, are the ones who directly benefit. So that was the first one, the first element. Element number two is ordinary laborers who don't own the means of production, such as factories, buildings, and materials, have little power in the capitalist economic system. So this is the main reason why he came up with this theory. He came up with it because he felt like the people that were doing the most of the work weren't having access to anything. In the modern day era, it would be almost equivalent to music artists owning their masters, or music artists owning a label where they have access to everything that they produce, and everything that they make is under their name. They don't have to pay anyone else, and anyone else is not contribute or getting a piece of their artistry. Element number three is to maximize profits. Business owners have an incentive to get the most work out of their laborers while paying them the lowest possible wages. And this is how business works, I guess, in capitalist societies, where the people that are doing the majority of the work not always earn the least wages, but when it comes to unskilled labor, that's usually the cases, especially in factories where workers come in and they have to do repetitive work and they get paid peanuts, as some would describe it. And the owners and the people who own these businesses have the power where they can ask these workers to do way more than they should be doing, and the pay doesn't increase. And the threat is usually, I can get someone to replace you anytime, because this is unskilled labor. So I can find another person to replace you anytime. Number four is, because workers have little stake in the process of production, Marx believed they would become alienated and resentful towards the business owner. And this is where that whole theory of the capitalist society will soon implode on itself. So he was saying here that because the working class get taken advantage of over and over. They'll eventually become resentful of the rich and the people who own these businesses, and they'll eventually try and overcome and overrule these people and try to get a stake and a claim into something that they can have their name on. The next element would be the business owners also employ social institutions, including government, media, academia, organized religion, and financial systems as tools and weapons against the workers, with the goal of maintaining their position of power and privilege. And with this statement, he was saying that once people get access to money and power, they make sure that they can invent and build systems where they can continue to get wealthy and continue to get more money. So if we go into specifics here, he says that these business owners get into comfy contracts with other businesses, and they create social constructs where they make people believe that certain things are right. And this could be the same, or this could be a great example where factory workers are told that the social contract is that we can make you work for a certain amount of time or more than you should for the same pay and replace you if you don't want to do that work. Those are social contracts. And they include governments, where governments make regulations that allow these companies to do as they please. Media, they convince people of trends and how your businesses should be treating you. Academia is the easiest way to convince people. It's been done through time and time, through science. Academia is one of the easiest way to convince people because people often believe stats without checking where they come from. The sixth element is, ultimately, the inherent inequalities and explosive economic relations between owners and workers will lead to a revolution in which the working class rebels against the business owners, seize control of the means of production, and abolish capitalism. So what he's saying here is, eventually, as time goes, as everyone does, once they are taken advantage of, they get tired of it and either leave or cause destruction. We've seen it many times with the French Revolution and in other countries where dictators are present. Eventually the people get tired of being taken advantage of and a revolution happens. So that's what Karl Marx was saying would happen in economic spheres as well. A major part of talking about theories means we have to get an overall view of the theory and everything that comes with it. So a major part of discussing this theory is discussing some of the criticisms that come with it. So some of the criticisms of Marxism was, although Marx inspired people, his predictions never came to pass. Some of the elements that I spoke about before, where he said that businesses, a multitude of businesses existing in one place, or one business existing where they become a monopoly, would not be good. We've seen in the 21st century that's not necessarily the case, because there are many monopolies, not just in our country, but even in America and some of the first world countries. There's a lot of monopolies that control the market completely. If you look at Amazon, for example, they control their market completely. That's why they are the company that they are right now. And Marx believed that increasing competition rather than producing better goods for consumers would lead to bankruptcy among capitalists and the rise of monopolies. And this is because fewer were left to control production. We've seen this is not the case because big companies do as they please. They are the monopolies in some industries, and the smaller companies that pop up, in the case of Amazon, when smaller companies pop up, Amazon will buy out their stock and offer it at a lower price and succeed. So this was disproved highly because although he believed that competition would lead to this capitalist society or capitalist economic system falling apart, that's not necessarily the case, because in this new society, capitalism still rules, and competition is the bread and butter of all businesses. Competition is the human nature, I guess. We've been competing since the dawn of time. That's just how we get things done out here, whether it's wars, Olympics, or in the business sphere. Competition is what breeds the best of us and what gets the best out of us as humans. Capitalism over the years has not collapsed, which is what Marx predicted. because of a fierce competition. The markets have changed and evolved with the times. There have been various market changes, whether it be crashes, recessions and depressions, as I'll speak about later. They have not led to predependence of monopolies. And predependence means equality of, or fact of being greater in number, quality of importance. Meaning the markets have not, there hasn't been a point where, because there's been an increase in a certain market, or a certain market has overtaken, or a certain business type has been introduced to the market, and there's a vast majority of businesses of that type. The quantity of the businesses does not mean that the industry will fail. It just gives the consumer more variety, and it means all of those businesses can thrive in their own different ways. This is even seen in the fact that wages have increased and profits have not declined. As Marx predicted, economic inequality has increased in many capitalist societies. Recessions and depressions have occurred, but they are not thought to be an inherent feature of markets. Lastly, a society without competition, money, and private property has yet to materialize. And this is what I said earlier. Although capitalism has its downsides, it's how the world runs. It's the rat race, as they call it. We all chasing something. We're all chasing numbers. It's money, it's private property, and it's a society full of competition, where you either compete or you leave. So, as much as Marx was against it, the criticism was all of his predictions never came to fruition. Although there were various countries that adopted the Marxism/communism theory and economic and political systems, it never came to fruition. And all of those countries that have adopted it are no longer using it, as opposed to one country, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So now we'll talk about Marxian economics versus classical economics. Marxian economics is a rejection of the classical view of economics developed by economics such as Adam Smith, and Smith and his peers believe that the free market, an economic system powered by supply and demand with little or no government control, and an onus on maximizing profits automatically benefits society. As I said before, a society where supply and demand are met, supply and demand are created on a day-to-day basis means a society is always healthy. It means everyone is chasing something. Everyone has a dream to fulfill. And Smith and his peers believe that a free market and an economic system powered and supply and demand with no government control means people are allowed to be creative. People are creative in their ways of making money, in their ways of running their businesses, in their ways of creating jobs, because creating jobs are important. Marx disagreed with this, arguing that capitalism consistently only benefited a select few, which is true. Under this economic model, he argued that the ruling class becomes richer by extracting value out of the cheap labor provided by the working class. So this was the main point of his theory. He felt that people were getting richer, the rich were getting richer, the poor were getting poorer. And this may be the issue, but we need to look at it as a holistic society and look at the benefits that capitalism brings. In contrast to classical approaches to economic theory, Marx favored government intervention. Economic decisions, he said, should not be made by producers and consumers, and instead ought to be carefully managed by the state to ensure that everyone benefits. He predicted that capitalism would eventually destroy itself as more people get relegated to worker status, leading to a revolution and production being turned over to the state. We see in our country that handing over production to government or the state is not always beneficial to the country, because there are companies like SAA who are going bankrupt right now, Danal, where they're losing loads of money. So this system doesn't necessarily work for everyone. And a system where the state runs everything means competition is no longer a thing. Look at Eskom. Eskom has no competition in our country right now, and they're producing a service that is that's nowhere near on par to what we should be getting. We will now go over to the activity, which is a short little pop quiz. Which will be point-based, and I'll explain the point system when this is played again. I'll explain it after, so when you give your answers, tally it up, and I'll let you know the point system for the questions that are multiple choice. So question number 1 is, what did Marx predict for the future? You can write down your answer there. What was the goal of communism? What is the central conflict identified by Marxism? What mode of production consists of each of the following except? So now here's the multiple choice question in which I will explain how the point system works. So the mode of production consists of each of the following except. So there are 4 different answers: means of production, relations of production, inevitable class, none of the above. So means of production would be 1 point, relations of production is 2 point, inevitable class antagonism is 3, and none of the above is 4. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Next question is, which of the following is a common obligation to the communist agenda? So again, multiple choice, so these are the points allocation. No one will work if the private property is abolished. The family will be destroyed. Communism violates property rights, all of the above. So no one will work if private property is abolished. 1, the family will be destroyed. 2, communism violates property rights. 3, all of the above. 4. The next question. Marxism is directly opposed to, fill in the blanks, and then I'll read the blanks out later, and seeks to establish a country built around. So now here's the options: capitalism, communism, society, anarchy, monarchy, republic, freedom, and imperialism. Now I'll read the sentence. Marxism is directly opposed to capitalism and seeks to establish a country built around communism. That's option 1. Option 2, Marxism is directly opposed to society and seeks to abolish a country built around anarchy. That's option number 2. Marxism is directly opposed to monarchy and seeks to establish a country built around the republic. Option number 4. Marxism is directly opposed to freedom and seeks to establish a country built around imperialism. So, option 1 is 1 point, option 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, and 4. Okay? Next question. Which of the intellectuals are not considered among the founders of Marxism? Option 1 for 1 point is Marx. Option 2, Engels. 3, Stalin. And 4, all were considered. So the fourth option is, are all of them considered among the founders of Marxism? What was the name of the small pamphlet-like book written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels outlining all the ideas of communism/Marxism? And Karl believed Russia would be the last country to turn communist. However, which country did Marx believe would be the first to adopt communism/Marxism? The last question, which country was the first to adopt communism as its political blueprint, and what year did it happen? Thank you. Once we're done tallying the points, I'll give you the points brackets to let you know which section you fall into, and that will be explained further as well. So that's the activity. Thank you very much. I have concluded my section about Marxism, its criticisms, its elements, its history, where it comes from, and some of the countries it is part of, and some of the countries that Karl Marx thought or predicted it would be part of. I also talked about his frame of mind and why he came up with this theory and why it was so important to him. I will now be handing over to the next speaker who will be concluding this video. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for your ears and your time. Thank you very much.